Hey there, folks. Welcome to my Retro Media Room. Today, we're looking at 5 PlayStation 1 games that in 2024 are exclusive to PlayStation 1 that you need to really check out. Now, a couple things to mention real fast. Emulation, I'm aware. You don't have to tell me. Of course, you can emulate these games on your PC or whatever else. That's not what I'm really getting into here. That's a whole other subject matter. And when it comes to digital versions of the games on PlayStation 3 and Vita, yes, if you invested in those early, there's quite a few titles that you're building that you can play digitally that you don't have to have these original copies of. So that's fine. That's great. That's why I did. I've got nearly 70 of them. The problem is, if you didn't, there's hardly any of them left now. So that doesn't really count for much either. So these 5 games you cannot find in the digital store. They are not remastered or re-released or anything like that. The only way you can play these, other than emulation, is you find an original copy and play it on either a PS1, 2, or 3, right? That's the point of this. And these are games that I really like and I want to share with you all. So we're going to start with Vandal Hearts 2. So the first game was on the channel recently. Love that game. This is also a turn-based strategy RPG, the likes of Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Ogre, XCOM, and so on. As far as presentation, the graphics are improved on the sequel here with better looking environments, that less pixelated, better color, more rounded edges, not as like sharp looking polygonal edges, right? So it looks a little bit more natural. The character sprites are nicely detailed, very well animated. They're a little bit less pixelated. They're not quite as blown up as they were in the first one. This is a very dark and mature game, very violent, dark, mature themes in the story. So that's very interesting. It's also more cinematic than the first game, so they certainly pushed the presentation in this one compared to the first one. So a lot of improvements there. Now, where this one is different from the first one, that I may not necessarily like more than the first one, but it is interesting, is the combat, the style of the combat system. So the first game, when you fight in the turn-based battles, it is just that, it's turn-based. You take your complete turn with your whole team, then the enemy takes their turn with their whole team. And this one, it's a little bit different. When you perform an action with your character, as soon as your action is being performed by your character, the enemy performs their action with one of their characters, rinse and repeat. There's no complete team turns. It's all individual actions and they happen simultaneously. So because of that, that completely rewrites your how you have to look at the strategy of this. So for example, you need to, when you know that you're about to move and attack, instead of going where they are, if you anticipate that they're going to come to you, you anticipate where they're going to land, you land behind them or beside them and hit them as they're trying to hit where they think where you were, right? So it changes the strategy very much. I like it. I don't like it better than the traditional method. I've never seen this in any other game, but it is interesting and I really did enjoy this game. So yeah, Vandal Hearts 2, very interesting and cool, unique game that, like I said, you can only play on PlayStation 1. Next is an interesting fighting game from Squaresoft. Ehrgeiz, God Bless the Ring. Very interesting game. Of course, right away in the intro, you can see the typical Squaresoft high-level full-motion video. Very epic intro. It's the only fighting game I was able to find that can come even close to that of Namco and their epic fighting game intros. And another interesting thing about this game is that there's a tacked on, rather rudimentary, but it's interesting that it's there, RPG mode where you run around in dungeons, interact with characters, manage your spells and weapons. So it's literally just a mini RPG mode, adventure mode that you can play in the game. So that's interesting that they tacked it on there. It's Squaresoft, so I guess it makes sense. But the most interesting thing about this game is the fact that you can play as Final Fantasy VII characters. You can play as Cloud, Tifa, and Sephiroth right from the beginning, and then you can unlock Vincent, Yuffie, and Zack. So very, very cool. Now the roster in it as a whole is interesting. It's pretty good characters. It's got good, the arenas are cool. It's got clean graphics. It's fun to play. But for me, the biggest selling point, and they knew it would be, the biggest selling point is the fact you can play as Final Fantasy VII characters, which is very cool. That's what made me get a hold of it, and it actually is a solid game that I recommend for anybody to check out, especially if you're a Final Fantasy VII fan. Next is a cult classic horror game that scared me since I was a kid, Clock Tower. Man, right when you fire this game up, you can tell this is something special. The dark and mysterious and scary intro to the title screen that's eerie with the awesome theme. and the menus, and then you go into the prologue. And when you start the prologue and you're trying to figure out what's going on, it shows the scissors and it zooms in on them, and it's like, what is going on? Who is this scissor man? And what is and it's talking about these murders that happened, and it's talking about the now. Funny enough, this is actually a sequel because the first one was on Super Nintendo in Japan, so this is technically Clock Tower 2. But when it got brought to North America, they rebranded it as just Clock Tower 1, and then we had 2 and 3 after this, which are really 3 and 4. So just bear that in mind. This is a point and click game, so that takes a little bit of getting used to, especially with the D-pad. There was mouse on PlayStation 1, but most people aren't going to have that. The voice acting is of the time back in 96. So the voice acting, don't expect anything modern in terms of that, but it is reasonable. There's multiple endings, so it has a lot of replayability. That's a very good thing. The only thing that affects the replayability is the prologue is annoying to get through because you can't really skip anything. So it makes it a chore to get through the prologue. But other than that, once you're in the segments of the game of dealing with and running away from Scissorman and everything, that's when the game shines. That's what it's worth getting to those segments. And the first area, that's one of my favorite areas, is at the university. You're Helen, you're alone by yourself. You're just stuck in the building with Scissorman, and it's just unnerving and unsettling. You find bodies that terrify the character. You never know when Scissorman's going to pop out and come after you. You really never know. The music is dynamic to when he's chasing you, and anywhere from the music being haunting to just silence is unnerving. The atmosphere is incredible. Now this was a pioneer for its time because this was the game that started where you run away from the enemy, you hide and you avoid and you temporarily disable by throwing things at them. But this is the game that pioneered all of that. This, like Resident Evil, was a pioneer of its genre. This was a pioneer of this other sector of horror games. So Clock Tower is an absolute classic. I highly recommend it. It's a little bit different to get into, but it's absolutely worth it to get to that dark and eerie atmosphere and interesting story. So check out Clock Tower. Next up is a classic Capcom fighting game, Rival Schools. I love this game. Unfortunately, the last time that we even have seen the series was Project Justice on the Dreamcast. So that's unfortunate because this roster is some of the best that Capcom has ever put out. And there's a lot of content here. It's across 2 discs. This is a 2 versus 2 fighting game, which is a lot of fun because not only do you have your regular moves and your super moves, hyper combos and so on, but you also have team supers. So whoever your support character is during that fight, you're able to, when you do a team super, they come in and do their unique attack with your character. And after that round is over, you can switch between the characters and it loads them in. So it's a lot of fun, a lot of variety. And also what's great is that on the first disc, there's a story mode, a story arcade mode. And you pair the appropriate characters that go together, and it's fully voiced in Japanese, and it's great. You become more intimate with the characters, you get to know them better. So like the character stories in this, I actually found myself caring more about the characters in this, kind of like I used to care about Tekken and Soul Blade and stuff, and Soul Calibur, especially Soul Blade and Soul Calibur. See, that was how you really did, like, where you get attached to the characters and their stories and world building. This is very, very good at that. So that's a really cool aspect of this, where you actually not only do you like the characters and their combat styles and their fighting styles, but you like the actual characters themselves and their stories. So the story mode is very neat. There's a lot of content there. There's a lot of extra bonus modes, like where there's a batting mode and a soccer mode, and where you do little mini games, and on the second disc, and there's a robust training mode, a lot of cooperative modes and 2 players. So a lot of stuff to bite off and chew here. A lot of fun, great feeling combos, high flying final attack hits when you win a match, so they go flying across the screen. It's just a great fighting game. I've loved it for many years. It feels like it's kind of somewhat forgotten about at this point, and I would love to see it come back. So yeah, Rival Schools, highly recommend it. And the final game we're going to take a look at, Doom Custom PlayStation Edition. Now, I know what you might be thinking, that, well, what's so special about that? There's full fidelity versions of it on current consoles and PC. Those are great. Those are great for if you prefer the original version of the game, right, with the original music and sound effects and everything. This is special, and this is a personal favorite of mine because I like the music better because it's a darker, like ambient, scary type of soundtrack. It's not the metal style soundtrack, although the in-game soundtrack may not be, but check out this incredibly epic intro and menu. So you get your metal right there, but in terms of the game, it's more scary and dark and everything, which I love. And I think the sound effects are better. I think the guns sound better, the monsters and everything. I think everything just sounds better. It sounds darker and scarier. And there's additional lighting effects they added to the game, like greens and reds and blues and so on, that enrich the environment further and the atmosphere. It's a good mix of Doom 1 and 2 together, where they kind of remixed levels to fit onto the game. So it's a little bit of both. It's a fantastic package. It's easily my favorite console port, old school console port of Doom from back in the day. It's a classic. This is the only way you can play this version. I wish they would add an update to the current version of Doom on current consoles to where you can download a mod of this version of the game into that one, the same way that Quake 2 and Quake 1, you can download the 64 versions of those games and play them on current consoles, like the graphics and level design and everything. I wish they would do that with this. We'll see. But anyway, that was 5 PlayStation 1 exclusive games in 2024 that you need to check out. I highly recommend them. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe and please like the videos to help me with the algorithm, because I'm trying to grow the channel and build a community. All right. I'll see you all next time.